Hi, I'm Connie Steele from Flywheel Associates and the Strategic Momentum Podcast.
And I'm Dan Yu from Fastbook Advisors.
And we're here to provide some actionable tips and advice to help you break through the common challenges that you face in your work and career life.
Because we've all been there and have had our own struggles with what to do, and more importantly, how to do it.
And for us, as you know, we're quite passionate about sharing our own stories and wisdom we've learned through the years. And of course, we're still continuously learning on the what, why, how, and when to address the barriers that have all gotten us stuck and frustrated.
So we hope these short advice videos help you gain traction and momentum to help you what you're looking for and along your journey. And so welcome to this week's episode where we have a special guest, Mark Angelos, who will be talking about the process of sales.
Yes, and Mark, a little bit about Mark. He is an institutional relationship manager and sales specialist. He helps build the trusted business relationships that foster customer loyalty and drive revenue. And over the past 2 decades, Mark has performed in this role at many of the large financial and technology firms such as Morgan Stanley, UBS, and Barclays Capital. And from small partnerships to global institutions, Mark knows how to build rapport with a customer base. And he's also produced hundreds of articles and videos on client relationship strategy and sales process. He's appeared on industry panels, podcast webinars, and his writings have been featured in media outlets such as Bloomberg, Traders Magazine, and FX Algo News. And he actually today shares how the global pandemic has altered the sales process itself and the steps to adapt your client management strategy in a world of remote selling. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Connie. Thank you, Dan. It's an honor to be here.
So Mark, so for our audience, he and I have known each other for 25 years, 26 years, something like that. And so we've worked together in two different capacities. Back in the mid 90s and then later in the mid aughts. And so when I first met Mark, one of the things that always impressed me about Mark was his authenticity and able to connect with the clients as well as distribution partners or competitors. And so, Mark, I think there's a certain quality that you bring to sales that I've always appreciated. I'd love to hear kind of what was your thought process, and I guess a bit about your magic as in front of clients.
Sure, thanks, Dan. Ironically, you were one of the first people that I really recognized as someone who the client was the most important thing, the absolute most important. And I think that that's become more important now, and that's what's missing with a lot of these large businesses, especially. If you're not truly servant of the customer, and that could be anything from you're the consigliere, you are the associate to get them information, you're a repository for them. You have to be the resource that they need and would pay for, and in return, they will then do business with you if and when they can, and that's not always. And I think that escapes a large part of the large businesses who just feel it's a transactional game of bang on them and get them to trade or get them to buy or get them to do whatever it is that you're offering. Instead, it's a give and take, and it's relationship based. And more so today, I think the relationship increasingly will drive sales, and that what we know as sales today is no longer the outbound push, but a lot of the inbound pull of friendship. That's honestly the magic, if that's the word you want to use.
So why do you think it's shifted though? Well, I should say, why do you think that this importance of cultivating a true relationship isn't necessarily happening? I mean, it seems like a very simple premise, something that most people would agree with, that you're more likely to do something where you have a strong relationship. But to me, it feels like everything has moved towards being much more transactional and not authentic.
And that's the problem, Connie. I agree with you. We reached a generational juncture, if you will, where number one, the BS detector on these kids, and I say kids, anyone younger than say 50, understand what you and I never did. Our parents worked for 30 years for the same firm. These people coming up today now are in a situation where they're going to be bombarded. And so real relationship was always interesting, but now it's a necessity because nobody wants to be sold to, but everyone wants to buy. That's the old adage. The truth of the matter is The generation is different. Obviously, with the pandemic now, you've got this remote selling thing where no business really has a handle on it. And it's increasingly become about what your friends or colleagues say about the product or service over what the company says about themselves. Social proof, as you know. So the evolution of the internet, the upcoming of a new generation, the transformation of business, unfortunately, globally right now, these are all coming together at the same time that has now impacted the sales process itself. And that means nobody wants to have anything pushed on them.
So does that mean that the sales or the process of sales is almost removed from the product, and now the salesperson is really just working to continue to sell their value prop as a person?
I think
And
that's a great point, Dan. It's both. You do, I mean, number one, the very first product anyone is selling is themselves. Number two is, who do I choose to ally that product myself with? What's the business behind that I'm going to say, I believe in this and I'm going to discuss this for the next part of my career. It's not to say the product or service doesn't matter. And it's not, I don't want to actually state that it's a secondary thing, but the reality is when someone contacts you to discuss one of their offerings, the number one thing on your mind is, who is this person and are they qualified? Before anyone goes on any job interview, before anyone takes an office visit from someone they don't know, the first thing they're doing is researching you online. So that's the beginning of any product or service right there.
So, what's important then for somebody who now realizes that they need to sell themselves too? It's about building their brand and building that relationship. What should they think about doing to establish that social proof that you mentioned earlier?
So this is an interesting point here, Connie. Obviously, everyone knows the trite answer is you should have your social in order and you should put stuff online they can research. Great. But the problem that no one's talking about is personal brand oftentimes conflicts with corporate brand, meaning, and I don't blame these large corporations, but firms want to be able to manage the outbound message. They don't just want some Yahoo putting things on social and that they're building their brand. So it becomes a game of, how do I integrate my offering personally inside the offering of the firm? Because if there's any kind of conflict there, it's not going to work. At the end of the day, I'll give you an example. I've worked at a variety of brokerage firms. Dan could tell you all the firms I've been at. Let's call it almost a dozen large major firms. And in all cases, I got the job because the client base remains the same. All these customers, there's a loyalty there. Whereas the firms, I'm not saying that I'm not loyal to my firm, I am, but the firms tend to be transactional in nature. They tend to be ring the bell now, especially large publicly traded stock option driven managers of firms. And so that's not always what forms that customer loyalty. And I think that being able to build that brand online and to ally it with multiple partners, if you will, becomes the game right now. And that's something where I can post online and I can make sure that I look good on my LinkedIn. And that's all. You should do that. But there's another layer there that people don't recognize, and that's the integration layer.
And so there's got to be this conflict, though, right? So and then the conflict, even though it's externally driven, right? Because there's trade now, get your commissions, your bonus, whatever, right? Even though it's externally driven, or you may have goals. You've got an OTE that you got to hit, right? And you got to get to your numbers. The conflict still remains, right, within yourself, right? Because even though you may have all of these external inputs, the conflict in yourself, someone like you who's played the long game, obviously has played the long game for 25, 28 years. I mean, how do you do it?
Well, so the answer is, it's a good point, Dan. The answer is that it's about intent. It's about what you're really going after. Am I truly looking out for my customer? Am I truly becoming friends with them? And I don't mean friends for now while they pay me. I mean, am I going to be in touch with Dan Yu 28 years later? Like, that's when you go into any type of a sales situation, you should be thinking, no matter who you are, how can I help this person outside of the immediate business? Will I remain friends with this person beyond this? I think to myself, I'm going to be on a balcony in Florida one day, sipping cocktails, retired, and I would like this person to be there with me. And maybe I wouldn't always. Maybe it's a person I just don't like, but you need to be thinking that way. And I think that that's the part where it's not a conflict. It's, who am I as a person? What's my intention? Intentionality sounds very fuzzy. It's like feel good and foofy, but it matters because the customers can sense it. You can sense it. We all know when someone just wants our dollar, and we all know when someone's actually trying to look out for us, where they might say something like, listen, this is not my product or service, but after we've talked, you might want to look into this other thing because although I don't benefit from it, I think you will. And that person's going to say to themselves, if not to you, great, how do I find the opportunity to do business with Dan or Connie or Mark?
So, can you give us an example of how you would operationalize, I guess, this sort of intentionality that you called it? So,
Sure.
if you know at the end of the day, it's all about how you best service your customer, truly understand their needs, and you're supporting them professionally and even personally, how do you go about doing that?
Right. So the first thing is you got to stop selling. Ironically enough, step number one is if I'm there to just sell you stuff, it's the wrong intent, as we said, and they know it, and it's over before it starts. So you're there to learn. You're there to serve. You're there to educate if you can, but you're there to listen primarily. You'll sell more with these than you will with this. The number two is you need to have a repository of stories, stories that will help the customer, not stories that help you sell more of your product. So I understand a customer is facing challenge X. I have another customer that faced that challenge, Mr. Customer. Here's how they solved it. Their solution, by the way, might not be your product, but you want to start with how am I helping these people? Number three, you want to start to link that to here's how I can help you, not this is your solution. This is one of the things you could consider because that's how they're looking at you, let's be honest. And if you are befriending them, and that's the word I'd like to use, it might not be a transaction right now. You might be laying the groundwork for something later. I've worked, decades on Wall Street, as Dan says. I've had to hit the metrics. I've had the revenue numbers. I get paid off of production. So I understand how that game works. But the key to that game is to unlock them by helping them. So then the next thing you need to do, you have to move yourself into an advisory role. As I say servant, I mean I have to be contacting them regularly, and that's not daily, but it should be at least once or twice a week with helpful tidbits, things that aren't maybe directly benefiting me, information they didn't know, perspectives they haven't heard, trends they didn't spot, developments in the industry that are going to make them look smart to their boss or whatever constituency they have. For every 3 to 4, I'm going to pick a number out of a hat, but every handful of those earns me the right to talk about my product or service, but not more than that, because they already know what you want. They're there thinking to themselves, okay, this guy's going to pitch. The less you pitch, I'll call it anti-selling. It's one of my favorite terms. The less you pitch, the more you're pitching. The thing that gets them to want to engage with you is, I kind of like talking to Connie. I like when Dan calls me. You want to leave every interaction with, did they want a little more? It's like show business. When I call next time and there's 2 other people on wait and they can pick up any call they want, are they going to take my call first?
That's great
Wow,
advice.
that's I especially love the you'll sell more with this than with this, which
Yes.
I think is such a great lesson for people that are not just selling externally, but also internally, right? So if they want their product to be
Agreed.
built, I mean, it's really understanding who the audience is, right? Who the client really is, and what do they really want. And so, one of the things that you taught me a long time ago, and I'll never forget this, is you would end conversations with, "So how can I help you?" Right? And that's always been something that has stuck with me because we were colleagues, competitors, and you were my client, right? And I think I was your
Ah,
client at least once, at
Yep.
least once. So we've had this dynamic. It's kind of a vicious circle almost. But really the lesson that I took away from it, and I hope other people in our audience can do as well, is Mark would always offer that last that last statement of so is there anything else I can help you personally?
So I'll give you an example of that, Dana. That's a good point. Thank you very much. You do the same, as I know. Clients don't expect you to actually help them outside of pitching them your product. So the minute you offer that, 90% of the time they won't take you up on it. but there's an aggregation of offerings where I can help you, I can help you, I can help you, let me know. I took a phone call one day from Joe, who I know you know is the head trader of a large mutual fund in New York City. I'm at Bank X, and I had previously been with Bank Y. He calls me at my new firm to tell me he's having problems with my former employer at Bank Y, whatever it was, and that could I help him understand how a situation had happened? It was a trading situation. I said, Joe, I don't actually cover you, number one. You don't do any business at this firm, but we're friends, and so I'll give it a look, but I can't, no guarantees. What's the situation? He outlines it for me. I take a look at it, and I said, here's what I think. Go back and ask them these questions. If this is the case, then they're lying to you. If this is not the case, ask them these questions. He came back to me a little while later. He was like, Mark, you were right. They were lying to me. And I was like, great. He said, I can't pay you. Thank you very much. So here's a situation where I now have a good guy chit in the corner with Joe. That's great. I actually, to this day, never did further business with Joe. But do you think I'm friends with him? Joe and I have met for cigars and cocktails at his little cigar bar in the city. The point is, I'm not trying to sell him at that time. I actually am trying to help him. And once they know that, don't you think Joe's talked about me behind my back in a good way? I don't know, but I'm sure there was some conversation of, I deal with Mark too. Oh yeah, he's a good guy. That's how it happens. It's the whole social proof circle. You're not going to badger them. And so the offer of what else can I do? How else can I help you? They make sure that that's not oriented around your product or service. How else can I help you? And the way that mostly manifests, you've seen this, Dan, you're the master of this, networking. I know Connie from you, Dan. How else can I help you? You said to me. That's a great example. I'm like, well, I'm thinking about doing some things. And you were like, let me put you in touch with some people. And that's it. As you know, network is the new alumni thing. And network is the whole key right now in this new world. And so that's how it will mostly manifest itself when you offer someone, how else can I help? But the truth of the matter is, it's the fact that you offered more than what happens next.
So my takeaway in terms of what sales needs to mean in this new world of the pandemic too, given that a lot of this is all digital, you have to find that way to, one, build that social proof, but in a different way, right? So it's not just doing the LinkedIn profile and so forth, which of course they're going to see. But when you engage with them from the very beginning, it is finding that opportunity to integrate really who you are and the value you can bring personally to the relationship, not be thinking about the product, but thinking about what you can offer them to support them along this entire journey. And because sales is about cultivating that connection with someone versus, to your point of everybody thinking sales is hunting, which I think everyone does, and because you have to sell in whether you are a salesperson in terms of your profession or within your own internal organizations, you're still selling. The first thing is just find that way to create a valuable connection so that they trust you more than anything.
So I agree with you, Connie. You need hunting, but everyone makes more money from repeat business than they do from new business in the door, which means farming becomes the real ticket now. And farming comes from relationship. Sales is nothing more than communication. And sales, by the way, is simply persuasion. How do you persuade? The very first step to persuading anyone for anything is communication, connecting, rapport building. That's farming. That's relationship management. And so the new version of sales, in my opinion, is relationship management. This is what's going to open more doors, bring in more revenue, get you what you want to hit for those targets. It's not getting 50 new accounts that didn't know who you were. It's taking the 3 that love you anyway and making them love you more. And that's got to do with the service end of it. I think the problem, most of these large firms especially, A, don't recognize that, or B, are missing the boat on the content. This isn't about marketing. Content creation was always considered a marketing thing, and the sales team has nothing to do with that. Actually, it's the key relationship management tool right now. In the modern era, content should be driving customer conversations, which create the feedback from the client via engagement, and then that cycles back into the new content creation. And what I mean by that is you need to be creating the content that answers your customers' questions and helps them, as we've discussed, one to many before they even ask the question. I'll give you an example. I was assigned the coverage of Europe, all of Europe, out of New York for a firm I was with. And I would go over to Europe to meet these customers and hear the questions and share best practices from the States. And when I would come back, the States folks would ask me what's going on in Europe. And so I would do these huge write-ups and have to help each other out. I was sending emails. And finally, I realized just put these online. So I began to publish them as a weekly article on LinkedIn. They're still there. You can look at them. And they're personality driven as well. They're peppered with Star Wars, as Dan knows, and the Avengers, because it's boring stuff. But the truth of the matter is, the minute you're starting to help these people with regular content, the questions would come in. I would get engagement and feedback through, and it was never directly on LinkedIn. It was always privately because of corporate overlords. And it was, can you talk more about this? If I have a question around a specific product, but it very quickly became not my product. I became a trusted voice that they would say, I'm using something similar to your company's product. Is it any good? What's the ups and downs? And that's where you have to the distinction between whether you're just a sales guy and a hack, or you really are a friend and trying to help these people out. Because they'll know, like, the truth wins out. In the end, truth is undefeated. Love that phrase. And so you engage them across the social platforms, all the social platforms, which is not something that the corporate world doesn't like. You feed them back the information and answers that they need, whether or not they're asking the question, but you need to know what questions they're asking. And then you build your future content around that. So it's a loop. Let's call it the merging of marketing and sales. It's using content to create connection and trust on a regular basis, not just a weekly article like I was doing, but on an ongoing basis. Because if you're talking to the customers every day and you're putting out an article regularly or a video or something where they can then respond to, that sparks conversation. That's what people say, this is helpful, or that thing you put out, Mark, sucked. I didn't like it. Right? Let's be honest.
Right.
Because you know what? I want to know more about blah, blah, blah. When I was writing, it was things about artificial intelligence, algorithms, data analytics, not the most exciting stuff, but stuff that people are smart folks in their business are too embarrassed to ask the question. And you know they don't know it. And they're not going to press the button unless they do. So it is self-serving in some ways, but it's also actually assisting them.
So playing the long game in sales, being that trusted advisor, in the personal sense, of course it's self-serving, right? Because look where it's taken you in your career. It's built your personal brand over and over and over again, such that everybody knows who you are, that should know you, and your most trusted clients, advisors, competitors, right, vendors, they're going to be your best advocate in the long run.
Right. So I'll tell you the truth. I've gotten more job offers from the competition in talking about products in general and not pitching my stuff than you would ever get if you tried to actually go interview all these shops. Because once you become a knowledge base for people, they come to you and you learn quicker. It's exponential. And so if you can use content to help people, and I mean help people, like I can't drill this enough. Content is all just push and here's my product. Most of the stuff on LinkedIn, as you well know, Connie, I think you termed this, LinkedIn is broken. I love this term. It's all about self-aggrandizing. It's about look at our employee awards. It's about congratulating my own company on my new product launch.
Right.
That's not helping anybody. What's helping is criticisms of your own product that you get from people that you can address in an anonymized fashion, right? You don't want to, this is all about, you never negative sell, but you're going to learn more from the criticism that you don't want to hear. And you're going to help people more by addressing their real concerns than you will by tooting your horn. And that's the shortfall right now with content creation in any platform. It's all the look at me, and the corporations love that, but it is not a two-way conversation. It's a one-way megaphone. And like the roadside billboards, instead of just driving by and not noticing, folks are scrolling by on LinkedIn and not noticing you.
Absolutely. So let's recap, because you provided a lot of great insight on really not just the trends that are happening, but most importantly, how to specifically be able to build that authentic connection, not just in a relationship in this particular way, but through content. So why don't we recap?
Sure. So I would say number one, you should be speaking to your clients with assisting content regularly, meaning you first, when I say speaking, I'm talking you publish it, video, written, it doesn't matter, but you need to get this content out there in an organized fashion that fits with your with your company's message. right? You don't want to tailor it, but you want to make sure that you're providing information and insights to the questions you know that they have but aren't asking. Number one. Number two, you want to have a cumulative effect when you do speak with the clients one-on-one. You provide info and insights, you listen, and then you bring that information in an anonymized fashion to the next customer. You try to help them with that. You get their feedback. You then bring that to the third customer, to the fourth, to the fifth. There won't always be stuff you can help clients with, but if you're not making regular efforts to bring them information and insights, you're not doing your job. Number three, you need to be engaging on the content feedback side. So on the platforms, you need to acknowledge, because the minute folks see you responsive, they will then ask the question. 90% of it, especially if it's business, especially high-end business, they're going to come to you privately. But it still matters that you show that you're there and not just publishing and disappearing, which is what companies do. Number four, the content needs to all be laser focused. There needs to be a laser beam approach from the firm in fitting with what's the message. And again, the intent matters. You need to be helping the customers primarily, and your product will or won't be part of the fit. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. They know what you want. There's no problem. You should own it. There's no reason for me to say I'm not here to sell you something. They know it. But the truth is, I'm here to help you first. This is one of the solutions you could consider. Here's some others if need be. That approach, now the corporations aren't going to like that. Let's be honest. But that approach is what builds loyalty. That's where you get the customers to ask you questions they wouldn't have otherwise. You know what, Mark? You mentioned that other product. You say that they're good on the data analytics side, but not good on the transmission of the trade order size. Like, that's where they want a little more information. All right. You do that long enough, and people will say, I trust this person. And that's it. Trust. Building trust remotely is all that's left, because the days of dinners and coffee and office visits, for the time being, that's all the kibosh is on that. So now, how do you build a career? How do you create rapport? And how do you develop customer loyalty? Because that's going to be what drives business. If you don't really know the customers and you're busy hunting and bringing in new accounts, this is not the environment where folks are going to say, I don't really know this person, I'm going to take a chance on them. Not today. And so you need to organize your content creation on a regular basis. It has to be regular. You need to respond and engage, and you need to make sure you're answering the questions that they're not asking, but you know they have. You better know what questions those are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Terrific stuff. Terrific stuff. Um, there's so much here that I think that our audience can really find value from, right? And just want to thank you so much for that. It's this is really terrific. Anyway, Connie, any final thoughts?
No, I walk away with some key points of that. Remember that it's about pulling them in, not pushing them with really unnecessary information or products that just don't add value, but you're really pulling them in because you are creating the relationship. So truly know your customer inside and out on a personal level and a professional level. So thank you, and we appreciate everything that you've provided. So thanks for watching, and until next time.
Please be safe and healthy, and remember to manage your career as a business.
Because in today's world, you have to understand the business of work.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you,
guys.
Mark.